Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of this build here. It's been a couple weeks since I filmed the last part, and I've done some updates, some changes, and I also want to unbox this GPU Waterblock on camera for you guys. So let's get into it. All right, first up, let's talk about what has changed, what I have done since part 2 here. So I have actually tubed up a couple pieces, a couple runs here with my stainless steel tubing, and you can kind of get an idea of what this build is kind of going to look like with the tubing here. So I've got the CPU block connected to this fitting up here, as well as the run that goes down to the bottom. So the way the flow works, or at least as of how I'm envisioning it right now, is the water is going to exit the pump, go into the GPU block, come up from the GPU block, go into the CPU block, and from there it's going to go up to the top. And I've got a connection tube that goes from the top, that goes all the way down to the bottom of the radiator, inlet into the radiator and outlet out of the radiator straight into the reservoir. Thus, I have tubed up everything I can. I'm really only missing 2 connections, basically to and from the GPU, which, as you can see, I've got the block here, so clearly I haven't been able to do that yet. The tubing I have here is stainless steel 304 12mm tubing, and it's been hand bent with a tube bender. Now, I have made some videos in the past showing you guys how I bend my tubes. If I remember, I'll try to leave a link down below for you guys to check that out if you want. I've got a 90-degree bend right here and a double bend at the bottom, right around the reservoir, mainly to kind of give me access to the LCD panel at the bottom, the control module, the D5 Next control module. So kind of get it out of the way instead of coming down. So that's why there's a couple extra 90 degrees here. I think it turned out really nice. The tubing bend for this was super hard because, well, it's multiple bends, but then I've also got a 5-degree kink and another 5-degree kink back just to get it close to the connection point. And if you ever bent tubes before, either acrylic or PETG tubes, the concept is the same, where usually when you have one bend, it's really easy to make it fit up. You know, you have multiple degrees of freedom. And once you get that second bend into the tube, all of a sudden you lock yourself in. And if you're off by 1mm here or there, you just basically have to waste the whole piece because it just won't fit. And especially with metal tubing, you think, you can just stretch it out a little bit here and there, and to make it fit, but it's actually really rigid. So once you get that bent in and it doesn't fit, you gotta scrap it and grab a new piece. That's kind of the difficulty with metal tubing. Now, if I put that aside here, and let's take a look at the GPU water block. The water block that I decided to go with is the EK 3090's Founders Edition water block. And this is primarily because for this build, I've decided to go with the 3090 Founders Edition, specifically the Founders Edition because the FE has that special small PCB with the little V cut inside. So the overall length, you'll see in a moment, is actually relatively short. And this is basically, it'll be the size of this water block. This water block here, oh man, is the heaviest water block I've ever held. And that's because it's just a solid chunk of metal. Inside the box, we got the water block and a special terminal here. And I've got some thermal pads, some thermal paste, and screws. I'm not gonna take that out just yet because I'm not installing it right now. So I'll probably dig into that once I'm ready to actually install the block. But putting that aside, just to look at this block here, initial impressions of this block is that it's huge, but at the same time, it's actually pretty small. Huge and heavy. This thing probably weighs 4 or 5 pounds of metal, really, because the frame is metal, the copper block is very thick metal, or the cold plate is really thick copper, and you have a metal back plate as well. So Here, let me get this plastic unwrapped. And let me get my grubby fingerprints all over this water block. By default, this water block has the inlet and outlet at the ends. This is unique to the Founders Edition, so both the 3080 and 3090 have this feature. You do also have a second terminal that allows you to come out the top and come out the bottom. So that's actually what I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using that because I'm going to be coming in from the side, going into the bottom, and coming out the top. And I've got to swap this over. This surface is anodized aluminum, and it's got a very, very nice texture to it. Both the silver and the black's got that anodized aluminum texture, painted texture feel. And it is very, very well made. In fact, I know in the past I said that I was going to be feeling a little bit guilty about removing the heatsink off of the 3090, the FE edition heatsink, because that's such a well-made heatsink. But I do think that this water block certainly does not disappoint and is a fitting replacement because it is just so well made. It's amazing. One interesting thing to note is that the terminal doesn't actually have a specific inlet and outlet, meaning the way the jet plate is designed, it's designed for water to go in one way as well as the other way. So that gives you a little bit more flexibility. With the CPU water blocks, they have a specific requirement of this is in and that's out, meaning they want the water to flow through the jet plate pointing down towards the cold plate. I guess the way that they designed it specifically, or it just doesn't really matter with this water block. One last thing before I mock this up for you guys is that I actually picked up a brand new cable from Cable Mod. In the last video, I talked about how I had this, I think this is like 400 millimeter long cable or 450 millimeter long cable that was supposed to go in and come out the back. The way that it reaches around the graphics card to have that slanted inlet, I just didn't really think that looks good. So I decided a shorter cable actually might be better because I'm just gonna come in from the front, and let me show you what I mean. If you recall in the last video, I talked about how the backplate is a big chunk of silver, but you can see here with the silver water block and then the silver tubing, this silver here isn't completely out of place. And with how short this graphics card is, especially with the tubes coming out of the top and bottom here, it fits this case really well. If you recall, the 3090 connection power connector is right here. The reason why I went with a shorter cable is that it just fits so much better with the connector coming in from the bottom here. All the cables are really, really short and nice and tidy. You know, I gotta fix this cable comb here because it's kind of bowing out a little bit down here. But again, that's little things. So yeah, that's probably the last update before the final part of this build. In the next part, we're gonna be installing the graphics card, doing all the tubing, and then I'll probably even throw in some overclocking and thermal performance of this build, just to wrap everything up. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. As always, hit that like button on your way out, and if you wanna see more videos like this, perhaps consider subscribing. Anyway, my name is Stan, and I'll see you guys in the next one.